So in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my short film Dive, which was in collaboration with NVIDIA. NVIDIA basically approached me and said, James, what do you want to make a film about? Like, that's a little bit of a mad situation to be in as a filmmaker. I don't really feel like it gets that much better than that. If you had told me that I'd be in that position when I was like 14, I wouldn't have believed you, mate. So I created a concept, a brief, sent that over to NVIDIA, and off I went to Norway to go and shoot this short piece around their RTX 4070 series of GPUs. What's going on, you lot? I hope you're all sweet. So, Dive. If you haven't seen the short film Dive, go and check it out. It's in the first link in my description. And then come back and we can have a bit of a chat, break it down, the story, pre-production, post-production, cameras, lenses, camera movement, sound, all of it, mate. It's all fun, juicy stuff. NVIDIA basically approached me and said, James, we've got this new series of RTX 4070 GPUs in some of our new laptops. We want you to make a film about being a creator, do whatever you want. And from my point of view, like, that is pretty much as good as it gets. I couldn't ask for much more than that. So I couldn't be more grateful really to NVIDIA for actually trusting me and trusting my vision. Something that I find really interesting is actually just portraying feelings that I have as a creator. And when it comes to editing, that's probably like one of them moments where I can just fully zone out and just go into the edit. And obviously in this particular piece, physically diving into the edit. I think that's a feeling that like a lot of creators, a lot of filmmakers get when they're editing, whether they're color grading, editing to a track or editing a story, you know, and start actually becoming a part of that edit, as it were. Like, even though that sounds a bit weird, but I just genuinely feel like we do that as creators. So something that I wanted to do was actually emulate that feeling, because I think a lot of people can resonate with that if you're an editor, if you're a filmmaker, whatever it is, whatever art craft that you actually do, any creative craft, I guess, when you just get into that zone of just the flow state, really. And that's something that I wanted to do with this piece, because obviously it kind of links with the fact that these machines allow us to get in that state and allow us to get in that zone. And obviously the entire focal point of this film was the Asus ZenBook Pro 14, which has got that 4070 GPU. Absolute madness of a machine. You know what, like, the weirdest part about me actually coming up with this idea? It was listening to the track. So the track's actually by a guy called Jordan Post. Weirdly enough, I was listening to it in a shower, where obviously there's like water elements, and I kind of got this idea of all of these sounds, these underwater sounds, and the feeling of just fully diving into the scene, diving into the edit and being tangled underwater in the edit almost, and changing the edit. Actually conceptualizing that was quite hard. It was quite hard to get this feeling, get this idea that I had in my head, get it into a story form that's actually digestible by the audience, and then actually in obviously a video form. Trying to actually start that off at the start, kind of juxtapositioning all of these different water elements, obviously the glass, the water outside, making sure that I had a beautiful, like, completely symmetrical setup, which we found in Norway, a guy called Peter, who actually had a lodge called Polar Panorama Lodge in Senja in Norway, which was amazing. It was lovely to be able to get the laptop like right up against the window, right close to the water. I really wanted that whole water element to feel super close, no matter where we are, what we was doing, hand going into the water, bubbles following us around, these kind of like ethereal bubbles that were kind of popping up in the scene, kind of creating a little bit of a foreshadow for the bubbles that are then underwater when the character's actually in the water, getting tangled up in the edit. There was a lot of these elements that I wanted to add into the film, which kind of aided the story when it eventually happened. When that dive happened, we dive into the laptop. That's kind of when this big build-up comes. So I actually shot most of this film on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. Brand new set of lenses. I used the Laowa Nanomorph lenses, the EF mount obviously, onto the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera. I also used the A7S III, and I used the same lenses, just adapted them. I had to punch in obviously because they're crop sensor lenses. I wanted to give the audience a feeling of already feeling a bit distorted, feeling like you're already underwater before you was actually underwater. So for me, using anamorphic lenses was definitely like a creative choice in how I actually wanted the film to look and feel to the audience. Obviously, almost every single shot in the film was shot on a gimbal or on a slider. I just wanted to keep the shots really clean. So when we're pushing into that scene, we literally push straight in, building intensity. Obviously right at the end we pull away because I want to like pull away from a scene and kind of allow the audience to subconsciously think that they're leaving the scene or something has left the scene. Whereas right at the start I wanted to push in. We want to build that intensity of the scene. Obviously, we got a ton of drone shots, these expansive drone shots that I really wanted to just make the scene and the environment seem kind of bigger than life, especially with the sound design and the track as well. Them kind of big, expansive, they're almost like dish sounds, you know, as you come out and you kind of blow out into these incredible big landscapes. That's what I wanted to do with the drone shots. But most of the time we're on a gimbal, there's hardly any handheld movement. And that's because I wanted the audience to seem like they were a viewer of the scene. They were like observing the scene. I didn't really want the viewer to feel like they were in the room with the character. There is 1 or 2 moments in the video where we're handheld, and that's where kind of things are booting off in the edit. And the only reason I stuck that on handheld is because I wanted for that very brief moment for the audience to feel like they're in the room, in the energy, and they can feel the energy instead of like observing the energy. So when it comes to camera movement for me, 99% of the time, if I'm doing handheld, it's because I want the audience to feel like they're there with the character. And if I'm on a tripod or a gimbal, it's because I want them to take a step back and observe what's happening in the scene. And obviously if the camera's moving like a push in, it's because I want to build the intensity. Or if it's tracking with, it's like we're following the character, we're watching the character, but we're not actually there with them. We're not experiencing that with them. So that's what I wanted to do when it comes to the camera movement on this piece. Now, the hardest part when it comes to the story for me is trying to get the audience caught up with that feeling of intensity when it comes to editing. So that brief moment before we actually dive into the laptop and just building this intensity, building that tension throughout, that was actually really hard for me. Usually I don't find it hard to build tension, but in this particular scene, I found it hard with a limited amount of space I had on the track to really build that intensity before we then took that big breather, before we then dived into the scene, into the laptop. So for me to do that, I had to slowly build them cuts up quicker and quicker, overlay some tracks so that we kind of feel like time's passing faster. Lots of eye movements, lots of kind of intensity building movements, getting tighter, until we have that kind of exhale moment before we then jump into the whole point of the video. That's kind of like the stamp where we jump in and we're like, everything's connecting now. So when it came to the dive into the edit, I didn't really want it to be a dive as such, like it was motivated by the character. I wanted the whole hardware, I wanted the laptop, I wanted the edit and everything to kind of take over. Because that's kind of what happens when you're an editor. Sometimes like you just find yourself completely immersed in what you're doing, immersed in the story, immersed in everything that's going on. You completely forget time's even passing. And it's almost like that phase of just kind of like closing your eyes and falling in, you know, like you're falling into this state, you're falling into this flow state. You don't actively push for that state. You know, it's something that just naturally happens as a filmmaker and as an editor. So I really hope that you guys got that, because I know a lot of people thought that it was like a motivated dive when it wasn't. It was a dive that was essentially created by the space that the filmmaker or the editor's in. Now, when it comes to the sound design, this is probably like the lightest sound designed piece I've probably ever done. There was hardly any sound design. I think that's because the track itself actually had a lot of sound design elements in it. If you go back and listen to the track just on its own, a lot of it has a lot of these nice underwater, big bloomy sounds which are already embedded in the track. So I didn't really feel like I needed to do that much sound design. But you can tell on a lot of the pieces where there's water, I wanted the sound of running water, I wanted the sound of struggling underwater. I also wanted the sound of like rushing past on a drone shot, you know, then kind of whooshes, just to make it feel a little bit more immersive. But when it comes to sound design, the whole point of that is to bring the viewer into the scene so they feel immersed. But I didn't really feel like I needed to do that much immersion when it comes to sound design in this piece. Now, obviously, when it comes to the actual editing of this piece, I didn't need to do too much editing because I basically had a storyboard. I had it written down. I always storyboard my short films like this before I actually go and shoot. I need to know what shots I want to get to make sure that my story's right. Now, typically when I storyboard, I will come up with a concept in my head. I'll then draw down some images. I'll then get a timeline out with the track on, and I'll cut out and I'll write on each single slide what the shot's going to be. Is it going to be a push in? What kind of lenses I'm going to be using? What kind of focal length, frame rate, all of that kind of stuff, focus pulls, whatever's going to be in there, so that I know when I'm on set, I know exactly what I need to do on each shot. When it came to the edit, it was actually a really simple edit. I didn't really need to do too much. A lot of it is just cinematography, cuts. Obviously, there was a scene in there which was a little bit heavy on the editing, and that is the transition, the dive into the scene. Now, it's actually two really simple shots. They did take us forever to get, but the one where I actually fall into the laptop, that was pretty simple. I just fell to the left-hand side of the laptop. I kind of feel a bit bad giving this away because I kind of want it to feel real and special, but basically my head fell to the left-hand side of the laptop. Camera, handheld, went down under the table, and then we done the exact same shot, camera going into the water, me diving into the water, and just cut them two together with a little water overlay on the top, which I shot at the time. So that transition was actually really easy. A little bit of directional motion blur and off we go, mate, and it all sounds good. Obviously, chucking in some sound design in there as well, that big kind of dive splash to really make it sell and make it immersive, I guess. So other than that, there really wasn't that much editing that was done. Like, there wasn't any mad transitions other than that one. Obviously, I did kind of jump this bubble shot into the second scene where it's then behind me. That bubble shot actually wasn't in that second scene. I actually chucked it in that scene, chucked the opacity over it, and then, you know, kind of pushed it behind my body just to kind of link the two together, because before that we didn't really see a bubble in the same frame as the human, as the subject.
What are you up to, mate?
Making bubbles. So let's actually talk about the Asus ZenBook Pro 14 here. It's an incredibly powerful laptop, especially when it comes to video editing. And obviously it's got them studio drivers pre-installed, so we get a much better and stable performance out of creative applications like Premiere Pro, for example. We've obviously got that RTX 4070 GPU. We've got dedicated hardware encoders when it comes to editing video files, which makes our editing performance just so much better. That's why these collaborations between Nvidia and companies like Asus are so good, because it allows the hardware and the software to be completely efficient when it comes to creative studio elements like Premiere Pro. Easily the best Windows machine I've ever used when it comes to video editing. I'm definitely not the biggest tech geek in the world. I'm definitely more on that creator side, but thankfully my friend Tom over at the Tech Chap has run loads of benchmark tests on this thing, and it is big time trading blows with the MacBook M2, and in a lot of instances it's actually massively outperforming it. So if you are looking for a new laptop with incredible video performance, definitely go and check out Tom's video so you can see all of the different techie bits that you're going to need to know before obviously buying a laptop, because this thing is an absolute beast. And to end this off, I just want to say how grateful I am for companies like Nvidia for just trusting me to make a short film and trusting me to come up with an idea for one of their products. As a creator, I honestly think that's kind of as good as it gets when a brand really trusts your creative vision to come up with a story. I really hope that you guys could see the kind of passion that came into that film, because it definitely was, in my opinion, probably one of the better films I've ever made. And it's definitely one I'm gonna, take to the grave with me, which is really cool. And obviously, thanks to you lot for, giving me some nice comments on that video. Let me know in this video what your favorite element of that video was. Was it the storytelling, camera movement? Was it, the sound design? What was it about that film that you really appreciated and liked? Anyway, you lot, thanks so much for watching. And as always, I'll be catching you lot in the next one, mate. Bosh!